and maintaining with great passion outdated programs and structures. It's a little bit like the first one, but not exactly. In other words, even though the church may be dying and declining and not baptizing anybody and not impacting its neighborhood, you just keep doing what you've been doing. You don't quit anything. You know, if you ever go to a dying church, my goodness, man, you open a closet door, it's like, wow, where'd all this stuff come from? I mean, there's boxes of stuff in all the closets and every cubby hole. You know, there's lots of silk flowers everywhere. There's lots of old. I was at one the other day, and I opened up this huge closet, and there's all this choral music. I mean, just, you can't imagine how much musicals from the 1950s and 60s that church did, and taking all this space, all this choral music. They haven't had a choir in years. So in a very real sense, dying churches need to clean out their closets, literally, okay, and just make space and get rid of the clutter. But they also need to clean out their closets kind of figuratively. You've got to quit doing everything you're doing when none of it is really making disciples and transforming the neighborhood and reaching people for Jesus. It may kind of numb the fact that we're dying, because we still gather, we still go through the motions, we still have the committees, we still maybe send out the newsletter, we still print the bulletin, we still have Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, we still do all these things, and we sort of feel like, well, hey, we're still doing church, yet really all of that activity, all the while, maybe the numbers are declining and there's no young people coming and you're not seeing anyone baptized, you're not interacting with the neighborhood, you're not making the neighborhood noticeably better, but man, we're still doing everything we've ever been doing. There's just fewer of us doing it. And it's really sad, because these people are really trying in many ways. They're doing all they kind of know to do, but all of that activity can just numb us to really what's happening. And sometimes you just got to stop and say, man, let's just clear the field here and say, here's what we really have. Man, we got a handful of folks, and we're not reaching anybody in this neighborhood. And we got a building we could share with the neighborhood. And how could we do that? And I'll talk to you about that in another Facebook Live, how you can do that. But I mean, it's amazing how churches that are dying don't want to quit doing anything that they're doing. I mean, you mentioned that maybe we could back off and not do this anymore. And man, it's like, oh, we got to keep doing that. Or maybe we don't need to send out a newsletter. Oh, we've got to do the newsletter, and all those kinds of things. And so, not that there's anything particularly wrong with the newsletter, I suppose, but I mean, you hopefully get what I'm saying. And so they just anesthetize their pain of death by just keeping on what they're keeping on. And listen, careful. Sometimes there's a little bit of pride in that. You know, hey, we still have Sunday night. We still have Wednesday night. We still do these things, even though we're not reaching anybody and nobody's coming to know Jesus and we're not making any disciples. Hey, we're still faithful in the way they're understanding faithfulness. And that's a whole nother Facebook Live for that one. So, anesthetizing the pain of death with an overabundance of activity and maintaining with great passion outdated governance and programs. And outdated governance. Man, I was in a church one time. I preached there. It was a church that was really struggling and trying to figure out if they were going to survive or not. And they had a business meeting right after morning worship. And I'll never forget this. This dear saint, she was the nominating committee. All right, there was nobody else, just her, and she had a spiral notebook. All right, and so the time for it's the annual meeting when they do the nominations for new officers and stuff. And there's maybe 30 or 40 people total in the church. It used to be a church of 300 or 400. And so she goes through flower committee, finance committee, fellowship committee, benevolence committee, and she got all these committees. And basically the same 7 or 10 people, are on everything. And then she gets down to some other committees and there's nobody to do them. And so she stands there with her spiral notebook and she says, well, raise your hand if you'll do this. We got to fill these slots today. And so finally some people, well, okay, I'll do that. And it's like, you don't need all of those committees anymore. There's only 40 of you here. I mean, you don't need a flower committee. You don't need a bereavement committee. If somebody dies, get on the phone and call each other and take care of it. I don't mean to be overly... I don't want to be harsh about that, but we have all this structure that we can't fill anymore. And rather than make the structure smaller and more productive, we just keep it out there, and it bogs us down. All right. So that's the second one, and I'll be quick here. The third trait that you see in churches that are about to die is that they begin to resent the community for not responding as it once did. There was probably a time in the life of that church when the community around it reflected the people who were in the building. I mean, there was probably a time when that church was first planted and first there, that the people in the building looked like and lived like and were part of the culture of the people around them. But one of the reasons churches die so frequently is that neighborhoods and communities change so frequently. I mean, just about the time you think you figured out a neighborhood or a community or a city, it's changed again. I mean, people are moving in, people are moving out, the stores are closing, new stores are opening. It's just constantly a constant mix of things. And so over time, clearly, the neighborhood has changed. Maybe 3 or 4 times. It may have flipped 3 or 4 times in terms of its demographics. And the church has not, all right? And so there was a time, this is really important, there was a time early in that church's life when it probably, most Southern Baptist churches, especially those in the post-war period after the Second World War, in the inner suburban ring, you know, the places that were suburbs in the 40s and 50s and 60s, most of the time, a lot of their growth was what we call the low-hanging evangelical fruit. That's what they got. People who lived in the neighborhood, who were like them, who wanted to go to a church, were looking for a church, and they had the same worldview, and it was just now the people in that neighborhood do not have the worldview of that church, all right? They don't have any worldview similar to that church at all. Maybe they're not even from this country. Maybe the English is even their first language. So now what do we do? And so after a while, you'll sense a dying church saying things like, this neighborhood just doesn't get us, they don't respond to us, and the frustration that the neighborhood doesn't respond anymore can turn into resentment of the neighborhood, that the neighborhood doesn't even like us anymore. We have a block party. I've heard them say this. We've had a block party, and we give away snow cones and cotton candy, and we let them jump on the bounce house, and they all come out, and then nobody comes to church. Then on Sunday morning, they never come. We never see any results from that, is what they say. Well, let me tell you why they don't come to your church. Because on Sunday morning, you don't have snow cones and cotton candy, and you don't have a bounce house, all right? Because that's what they want. And you don't do those things, have snow cones and cotton candy and a bounce house in your church lawn. You don't do those to get the people in your neighborhood to come to your building on Sunday morning. I mean, if they do, that's great. But that's not your reason. The reason you have all of those activities on your front lawn is to get the people in your building into the lives of the people who live in the neighborhood. That's why you do it. And to love those people and learn what their hurts are and see if there's a way you can serve them and minister to them and care for them and meet their needs where they are. Here's the question that a church has to ask itself. At the end of the day, is the community here for the church, or is the church here for the community? And many of our dying churches really do believe the community is there for the church. In other words, the community is that thing that we're going to feed off of. We're going to grow our church again. If we could just get the people in the community to come in here and be part of us and help us grow our church. If we could reach the people in the community to help grow our church. No, the community is not there to serve the church, right? The church is there to serve the community, to love them, to care for them, to take the gospel to them. And I'll be real brief. You know, one of the ways you could do that is you've got empty Sunday school spaces in your building. Take one room, turn it into a really cool birthday party room, man. Paint really cool animals on the walls, put cool colored tiles on the ceiling, and then go door to door, put it on Facebook, print out brochures, hang them on people's doors, and say, look, if your child needs a place to have a birthday, we have a birthday party room in our church, and you can go online and you can fill out the application, and somebody from our church will be there to greet you and open the door and host you that evening. I mean, wouldn't you want to have a couple of your church members hosting a birthday party for a neighbor who doesn't come to your church? I mean, I could go on and on and on. That's what I mean about not resenting the neighborhood because it didn't respond as it once did. So let's back up and we'll just do these 3 real quick, and then next Monday night we'll do 3 more. 3 very real characteristics of a dying church, all right? First one, they value the process of decision over the outcome of decision. Secondly, they anesthetize the pain of death with an overabundance of activity and maintaining with great passion outdated governance and programs. And thirdly, they begin to resent the community for not responding as it once did. All of those are correctable, but left uncorrected, they will all lead to a terminal end in the life of a church. Hey, if you haven't signed up yet for our Replant National